at the end of my last video that I needed to check this thing for a high idles. This could be for SR, KA, probably quite a few other engines too, but main thing is I want to boost leak check it, it's TPS, throttle stop screw, idle air control valve. A couple main things to check if you're getting a high idle on here, and hopefully by the end of it I can actually solve what's going on with mine. All right, so the first thing that I did was I made this boost leak checker. PVC cap, 2 3/4 diameter, and I just got a hose coupler that fits it. Gets 2.5 inch for the end of my outlet on the turbo there. A little valve on it, and then a gauge on it. Yeah, so I use this, put it right, take your intake off, put it right under the snout of the turbo. I would say however much boost you're running would make a difference, but I just pressurized this to 15 PSI and it held. If it's not holding pressure, you want to listen for any hisses, squeals, any air coming out of anywhere, or if you can't hear it, you can use, I got out some soapy water. You can kind of spray, you want to check your main intercooler couplers, intake gaskets, and wherever you think that the air could be coming from. So that's one of the main things to check when you're getting idle issues is vacuum, obviously, with any of the intercooler piping or intake manifold. So on mine, checked it. I actually found one intercooler pipe right here that was leaking a little bit. I readjusted the coupler and it didn't make the high idle go away. So it's idling at about 1200 RPM and we need it closer to 800. Just for reference too, this thing is on a link ECU, so there is some stuff that you can change in the ECU, but still, even with the idle air control valve at 0 duty cycle, it's still idling high. So we're gonna go to the next thing. High idle can also be caused by a timing issue. Check your mechanical timing. On the KA, it has a distributor here. You're gonna wanna hook a timing light up to it. But on the SR, you can also hook a timing light up to it from a couple different ways. There's a timing loop on the back of the wiring specialties harness here. So you can use the timing loop to get your signal. Obviously take these 2 screws loose that hold the cam angle sensor. If you're on standalone, whatever your base calibration is supposed to be, you can watch for that on the crank pulley, or if it's factory at 15 degrees on the timing. All right, the next thing we want to do if we're on a factory ECU is to check the TPS. Now the TPS, it's got 3 wires on it, top wire, middle, and bottom, so it's A, B, and C. You're going to want to hook up your multimeter, leave the connector plugged in, hook up the multimeter negative to the top one, hook up the positive to the middle one. Don't start the car, but turn the ignition on, and between these two, the top and the middle, A and B, you should be getting about 0.45 to 0.55 volts. And then at wide open throttle, you should be about 4 volts. Now, if it's not at 0.45 to 0.55 volts, we're going to want to take these 2 screws, this screw and this screw, and loosen them and rotate it until you get that 0.45 to 0.55 volts. You'll see the intake's off here, but I'll get to that in just a second from where we're actually at right now. But the other thing I checked was make sure there's no tension on the throttle cable. Obviously, if your throttle cable has got any tension on it, that will cause the idle to be high. Also, there's a throttle stop screw right at the back here. This shouldn't really ever go out of adjustment, but if it does, or if you got one that was taken out previously or anything like that, it's just an 8mm head with an Allen. You want to rotate this to where it just doesn't bind. So I need to adjust mine a little bit because I adjusted it back too far when I was playing with it, but you want to make sure there's no stick in the throttle plate here. Once you get it from it not sticking, then it's good. So mine should be about right there. I just set this idle air control valve down really quick for reference. This might be a little bit different on individual setups, but I have a lot of stuff deleted in here already on this red top. When the the upper half of the intake is on, you can get to this idle air control valve screw. You can use this screw to adjust the idle. I think it only goes up and down about 60 to 80 RPM, I believe is what I read on that. So if you've got something more than that range, then you want to look into it a little bit farther. To get this out, S13SR, obviously you have to take the upper intake off, and that's where I'm at right now. Pretty straightforward. If you have these bottom brackets, the main bottom Y bracket here that goes to the block to hold the intake on, and this other one that goes to the alternator bracket, this lower piece you don't actually have to take off for the plenum, and then that way you don't have to take all your intercooler piping off and everything. So basically what I did to get the top half off, pretty easy, you just take the 8 nuts and bolts out from the top, you take, should be 2 nuts and 3 bolts from the bottom half here. There'll be a couple connectors and this one bolt right here from the front of this air intake tube, and you should be able to get this top half right off. And also the fuel lines. So the 2 fuel lines, the one hose that goes to the PCV, and then the bolts for the top, the bolts for the bottom, the throttle cable, and maybe 1 vacuum line, and you should be good to go. It should come right off. Now, to make it a little bit easier, I did loosen this bolt, and that helps this bottom half move a little bit, because it does want to catch on this stud when you're coming off with it. So just a note there, that might help somebody out. Here we are. I'm replacing this idle air control valve. I'm hoping that the idle air control valve has an internal leak, and I'm going to show why. I've already tried cleaning it. All right, and I do want to show really quick how you can test the idle air control valve to see if it works. Mine works, but I'm thinking that it has an internal leak here because the little diaphragm isn't sealing all the way. If you do want to test to see if it will move at all, if you've already tried cleaning it out and everything, if you look at the connector on the inside here, we're going to be focused on the bottom 2 pins, so the left and right. So the bottom left is going to be the ground, and then the bottom right is going to be the power. So I have my power probe here. I'm going to hook up ground lead onto the left side where the ground's at, and then I'm going to probe the right side and then apply power, and we can see it moving. So yeah, that's how to check to see if the motor still works in here. This spring's supposed to be sitting up here, and it's not. And this is the actual pin. So the motor itself goes here. This is the adjustment motor. I just took the 2 screws off. Comes out right there. And this is the pin that goes in and out to adjust the idle. See how there's no tension right there where it's supposed to seal? Right there. So that is what we're looking for. I'm hoping that the new one, see, maybe when it's idling high, the air is just bypassing like right here instead of it sealing up like this because of this loose spring. So we're gonna give that a shot. Hopefully the new one fixes it. All right, so the new idle air control valve just got here. There was a couple revisions on the part number, so I'm assuming that it's gonna look a little bit different from the pictures, but there wasn't really any good pictures of the inside of this, so I'm curious to see what's different between these. Take this hose off really quick so we can get a good idea of the difference between these two. Before I get to that, just for reference really quick, I put the motor back in to put whatever tension would be on the pin, and still. This one looks like it has a metal screw. This one has a plastic screw. Not too much different from the front here. This housing looks a little bit different here and here, but I think the major thing is going to be on the inside. This one doesn't even have a spring in it. It's a completely different design. The spring on the bottom in the back on this side is just for the coolant, so that when coolant's going through it on a cold start, it can adjust it a little bit, but I don't have these coolant lines going to here, so I wouldn't be able to utilize that anyways. But the main one we're looking for here, idle control motor, is going to be this pin right here. It'll be the one here with the spring on it. Maybe they updated the design because of just known issues with it. That's typically the case, I think. We're gonna put this thing on and see how it does. I've said this so many times, but I'm gonna say it again. This is so cool that you can still get parts for this engine with it being like 30 years old or whatever. But a couple other things I got in this Nissan order. The gasket for the idle air control valve for the S13 is right here. The oil filter, got a new PCV valve, bushing for the clutch pedal, and I got this hose that comes off of the PCV valve that goes to the little elbow runners that go into the intake. I'm gonna go into a little cross pattern here, and then right after this, I'm gonna be just about ready to put the top half of the intake on. Make sure this harness is out of the way. Need to get this little hose put back on here for the air intake. Let's see how this thing is supposed to be clocked. So this goes up. So we're gonna want this to come over a little bit. Let's see if that will do the trick right there. Yeah, that should be good right there. And then we can clock it as necessary once we get the top half on. But let's get some pliers, get that hose clamp on there. There, that one's on, nice and tight. Man, I really hope this works. Let's see if it's easier to run these first and then do the bottom maybe. Bottom I think is gonna have to move down a little. There we are, just like that. Both top studs in and both bottom studs in. Boom. Now the rest is pretty self-explanatory. Just all your two nuts and bolts in the top, two nuts on the bottom, bolts, hook all the lines back up, and we're gonna see if this thing works. All right, I'm gonna tighten the top one first, and then I'll tighten the bottom one. Let me get them all snugged up first. I'm gonna go inside to outside on these. And now I'm gonna do the bottoms, inside to outside. Fuel lines back on. This vacuum hose. This one's from the fuel pressure regulator. You can tap into quite a few different vacuum sources for this, but I just have it into the nipple right above the throttle body. This is one of the best purchases I made for doing these restoration type spring clamp assortment set for like 10 bucks. This makes it so nice not having to reuse the old ones. That one should be good. This is a 16. And then for this side, 14 for that side. Did make sure that this PCV valve and this hose wasn't leaking. So this wasn't the issue. I'm just replacing them now. because I already have everything off. And I finally get to get this nasty red oil cap off of here too. Should be ready for first startup. We were at like 12 to 1300, and then when it warmed up, it got even worse. There's probably a ton of things that I didn't mention in the beginning of the video that could cause a high idle, but just from experience and from doing research, that seems to be like the main things that could cause it. And yeah, we're gonna see if this fixed it. So hopefully we're onto something here. Gotta plug the battery back in. I think it worked. Seriously, it had never idled this low before. I'm gonna let it warm up and see where we're at. I haven't adjusted the screw yet on the idle air control valve. The screw on the top there, I haven't played with it yet, so let's see what that does. Okay, it's already screwed in all the way. We're at like 1100. Oof. I don't know why I just wanted to idle low for just a second. Yeah, this is what it was doing before. I don't think we fixed it, but at least we know that the idle air control valve isn't an issue now. Not sure what I'm gonna do next, but hopefully I help somebody out about, you know, maybe your issue could be one of the other things that I mentioned. So I guess that's what it's all about, right? Just keep trying until you get it. So we'll see you for the next one. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment. If you have any questions or anything, I'll be sure to get back to everybody. And hope you have a good day, and see you on the next one.